Grab your Guinness and your Lucky Charms because Farmageddon is crossing the pond. Iowa State and Kansas State will kick off the college football season in Dublin this Saturday with Rocco Becht and Avery Johnson once again going head-to-head. Of course, this is the first AP-ranked meeting between these two teams since 2002. The Cyclones have won 4 of the last 5, including a 29-21 win last season. But Kansas State head coach Chris Kleiman hopes to set the tone this weekend with a win.
Wherever we're playing, once we kick that thing off, it's a football game, whether it's at our place, at Jack Trice, or in Aviva Stadium, that we got to be where our feet are and be ready to execute and be able to adjust and stuff. But you're crazy if you don't pinch yourself to say, wow, what a moment that we're in right now.
Certainly going to be exciting to see the backdrop of Ireland for college football as we welcome on the Cover 3 podcast crew of Chip Patterson and Tom Fornelli. And guys, before we even talk about the matchup, I do want to talk about the location of this game. Football continues to change each and every year. This is just the latest step in this, Chip. What excites you about seeing a college football game kicking off in Dublin this weekend?
Number one is the experience for the fans and the players. We continue to hear from the trips that have gone over there for the Aer Lingus Classic for this game out there in Ireland that, this is something that is very unique. And, while there are some ups and some downs in terms of the games that are being played here, like, for example, these are 2 Big 12 title contenders. And this game more than likely will play a role in who decides the Big 12 championship. From Dublin to Dallas, there's the Big 12 title race for you. But ultimately, that's why I think the positive, the thing that makes me excited is seeing the pictures of all the Kansas State and Iowa State fans who are landing, who are getting acclimated, who are going out to those pubs and getting excited for the college football season. And I've even been contacted internationally by Irish News Radio with requests saying, please tell us about college football. So the game is spreading. I just wish maybe we had different matchups for some of these kickoffs.
Chip Patterson is the true Mr. International. He's talking to his friends across the pond about football. I think it's great to have the game in Ireland simply because of the setting, and I think it's a gorgeous stadium that they're playing in. So it's a fun trip for fans. It's an exciting way to start your year if you're able to go on vacation and watch your team play in Ireland. But to echo what Chip's saying, I'm not a huge fan of having a rivalry game and a conference game to do it to start the season because, as Chip mentioned, this could be one of the most pivotal games in the Big 12 this year when it comes to the standings at the end of the season. So to take the game off campus and send it to Ireland, I don't know if that's ideal for this spot, but it's a really fun place to watch a game. And it is a gorgeous stadium.
I can't get over Chip Patterson flexing on us, talking about how, the international reporters are calling him because they need information, Chip. We love an international Patterson there. I will mention that K-State has played overseas before. They played Nebraska in Japan, but that was back in the early 90s, so not a lot of carryover there. In terms of the matchup, though, guys, it should look a little bit familiar, at least behind center. You've got both quarterbacks returning. I want to start the conversation, though, with Rocco Becht, Tom. He's a kid who grew a lot last year, and he says he wants to prove that he can be one of the best in the conference, adding earlier this week, quote, I want to prove it a lot. I think last year I was able to do a little bit of that, but there are still areas that I can grow in to make myself more profound in that area as one of the best in the Big 12. Tom, are you buying into this notion that Rocco Becht could be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 this season?
Yeah, I definitely buy it. And I mean, that quote is one of the reasons I like Rocco Becht so much, in that he's confident in his ability, but he also understands that there are areas of his game that he needs to grow. And I'm sure he has heard plenty this offseason about, hey, well, Rocco Becht had some really good numbers last year, but he had 2 NFL receivers to throw to in Jalen Knoll and Jaden Higgins, who both went in the first half of the NFL draft last spring. So what's he going to look like without those guys surround him? Will he be able to carry the offense? And I think that's a pivotal question for Iowa State going into 2025 period, because those are 2 very good players that you do need to replace. And Rocco Becht is going to have to shoulder a lot of the responsibility and be responsible for that, to also work in new receivers.
Yeah, Rocco Becht, has that kind of confidence. I think it comes from the family. Anthony Becht has never stopped short of letting the Cover 3 podcast know when we've got it wrong on Iowa State. So I know where that confidence comes from, Haley. Rocco Becht, the player, though, he's looking around. He's like, I was a top 5 quarterback in the Big 12 last year. So if I put in that work and if I put in that development, I can go to being one of the best. Now, there is a lot of competition there. You can look around. You see a Sawyer Robertson at Baylor. You see a Josh Hoover at TCU. You know, you see some of the competition that you have in terms of being the best, including the quarterback on the other side of the field. But for Rocco Becht, I do think that there has to be the belief that he was thrown into the fire. He had great weapons, and now it's time for him to shine. This team is good at the line of scrimmage. They got 2 good running backs to help him out, but he does, as Tom mentioned, need to level up the passing game with some of that individual excellence.
I would like a Cover 3 podcast episode where you guys just go through all of the complaints and the viewers that are unhappy with what you guys are talking about. That would be some fun stuff. Let's continue, though, talking about Iowa State. Guys, I'm going to be real. I like my bacon crispy. Iowa State likes their bacon healthy, and that's what they're getting out of their linebacker in Caleb Bacon. Nearly a year after a season-ending injury, and the former walk-on is ready to return. I mean, Chip, how big of a boost is Bacon to this defense and also just for the morale of the team?
Yeah, I mean, this might be the comeback story of the year. You know, that kind of injury isn't just something that can end your season. It's something that, in some cases, can end your career. And it was such a point of issue for this defense last year, because he wasn't the only injury that they had at the linebacker position, and you just ended up having to go to the 4th, the 5th, the 6th linebacker by the end of the season. So Caleb Bacon returns, and he's got his own individual resurgence, but so does this whole linebacking core, because I think Iowa State's linebacking core, with Bacon as one of the leaders of that room, is a real strength of this defense. I expect them to be very solid against the run, you know, gap sound, integrity, all of the things of that nature. And so we celebrate the individual comeback story that's him getting back in action, but also we look at the fact that that entire linebacking room is now so much healthier than it was at the end of last season, and could end up being one of the real spots where Iowa State is able to hang its hat here in 2025.
Yeah, Chip, you mentioned the attrition that they suffered at that spot all last season. It was devastating for them. If you look at the statistics, like, it's kind of impressive how good Iowa State was last season, considering their run defense was atrocious. They finished 96th nationally in EPA allowed per rush. They were 109th in success rate against the run. Like, their defense was putting their offense in bad spots, and they had the guys who were able to overcome it. But now maybe that defense can take a step forward to help pick up the slack for some of the offensive production they've lost.
Our partners at 24/7 Sports have a great story up right now about his journey to wearing that number 26, what that means to him, as well as how he's ramping things up ahead of 2025. Encourage everyone at home to check out that awesome story. On the other side of this Farmageddon matchup, guys, we've got Avery Johnson returning. He threw for 25 touchdowns last year, one of just 2 players in all of FBS with 2,500 passing yards, 500-plus rushing yards, and 25 passing touchdowns. The other is a guy that we've been talking about a lot in John Mateer. Tom, we've seen the hype around the OU play caller there. What's the hype level for Avery going into the season?
Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned those stats, and that's a pretty impressive season. But when people start talking about Avery Johnson last year, it's mostly kind of in a disappointment the way that they view it. But this is a guy who had 3 very bad games. He had a horrible night on the road against BYU. He played poorly against Houston and Arizona State. But in their other 10 games last season, Avery threw for 24 touchdowns with 4 interceptions. And then you bring in his ability as a rusher. He is typically one of the fastest guys on the field. So last year was his first full season as the starter. There were ups and downs. Now you would hope coming into his second year running the offense, you see the kind of progression that you want in a young quarterback to see if he could take his game to the next level. And if he can, make no mistake about it, this is one of the more exciting quarterbacks in the country.
Yeah, if you want to get real reckless and get a Kansas State fan hot and bothered, remind him about how Joe Burrow was just okay in his first year as a starter, and that now there is the opportunity for him to be able to take that next step.
That's the people coming after you, Chip. You call for them to come for you, and then your lights start flickering. Good to see that you're still okay. Let's see if we can hold on here for a few more minutes, because I do want to talk about that K-State defense. The defensive coordinator, Joe Klanderman, has been very vocal about his confidence here in the secondary. He's had to replace some key players in the group, but they did bring in some transfers to help. Chip, I'm going to come to you first here so we can get it out of the way. How are you feeling about that group's success?
It's a concern right now, Haley. If I'm being honest, it is a spot that they need some development. They need some players to take a step forward. And I think that is something where I think you're glad Iowa State doesn't have the same passing attack of last year as they do this year, because Kansas State needs some players to step up very, very quickly.
Chip, Tom, we certainly appreciate the time. Week 0 is upon us, and we know that the Cover 3 podcast is the place to be when you need all the info, whether it's receipts, storylines, all of the things. Want to give you one look at that college football Week 0 schedule. It all kicks off on Saturday, August 23rd. It begins overseas in Dublin, Ireland, with a ranked-on-ranked matchup between Iowa State and K-State. But also, we've got a couple of games coming your way on CBS, of course, right here on CBS Sports Network. Sam Houston, Western Kentucky at 7 Eastern, and then Stanford at Hawaii, 7:30 Eastern for that game.